Hey everybody, this is my 55-gallon gourami tank, although at the moment it's only got one lonely little female honey gourami in here, but hopefully that will be changing in the fairly near future. In the meantime, I was asked to shoot an update on my Siamese Algae Eaters that are in this tank. You can see them in the back, down there at the bottom, sort of darting and dashing around, chasing each other. When I was sold these, I was sold them as sort of algae eating sharks, and I couldn't get any kind of definitive answer as to what actual species they were. I did enough research on the Siamese Algae Eaters versus the flying foxes when I put some Siamese Algae Eaters in some of my other tanks. I actually have these fish in 3 of my tanks, although these are by far the largest ones. So I got these not long ago, and they were already this size. So the sort of common knowledge you'll get when it comes to most algae eating fish is that they tend to eat more algae when they're younger, and as they get older they tend to eat less, and you've got to sort of supplement their diet with more fish food as opposed to just letting them feed off of the algae and the offwalks in the tank. And of course they don't do nearly as good a job at keeping your tank clean when they are fully mature like this. So I'm happy to say that while they may not destroy the algae the way the younger ones I have do in some of my other tanks, they're still doing a pretty good job of keeping on top of the algae in this tank. I'm really happy with the way it looks. I really am happy with their behavior. They do sort of chase each other around a lot, but it doesn't seem like aggression. I definitely don't want to use words like playful or lonely and stuff like that. I don't like trying to humanize the fish. I don't think they have those types of experiences. I don't think they're in there playing with each other necessarily. It's probably some sort of pecking order type establishment or something like that, but it doesn't seem to be causing anybody too much stress or bother, and most of the time they just kind of hang out and lay on the leaves of the plants. This temple plant here is one of their favorite places to hang out. They're obviously a little more excited with me being right here in front of the tank shouting at them. But for the most part, they just kind of hang out, they lay low on the leaves, and then they cruise around the tank munching on the algae. So if you're a regular viewer, you will know that this tank has been having some algae problems as of late. Not really sure what happened, but the algae in here got really out of control, and I was treating it with different stuff, and the algae was always the problem. I was always able to get on top of the sort of other growth, the offwalks and the cyanobacteria and that sort of thing. But the algae in this tank was always just out of control. And one of the problems I have is that I've got Spirogyra hair algae or filamentous algae, and most fish don't eat that. And once it sort of covers the surface of stuff, the other fish they won't eat what's under it. However, what I have found that with these Siamese Algae Eaters, they seem to love the stuff. And once they've grazed all that out of the way and moved all of the hair algae out of the way, it exposes the stuff underneath that the other grazing fish, like the rubber lip I have in this tank, I've got a hillstream loach in this tank, and those fish actually will get up against the surfaces and scrape and scour and keep everything nice and clean. You can see how that rock right there has been scoured clean. That's only because those Siamese Algae Eaters got in there and removed all the hair algae that was growing on it. If it wasn't for them, it would still be all green and fuzzy and covered with flowing hair algae. It's just, it's amazing what those Siamese Algae Eaters do. So that's my 2 big ones that are in that tank, and they're fairly new. I've got 2 in this tank if we can find them. I haven't been in here yet today. There's one. Again, they usually just kind of hang out in the leaves. And the other one looks like it is back there. I can see, well, you can kind of make out its markings. If you look right back in there, you can see where the other one is. The one up front here, and then the other one's way back there. But it is back there. It is lying in the leaves of the Anubias, which is what they spend a lot of their time doing. These are younger, but they're getting larger. And this tank does not have the hair algae in it, so I'm not too worried about this tank. Between them and my huge rubber lip, I always call this a rubber lip, gold spot Pleco, you can see that right there is the Pleco that's kind of lying in the, it's actually its eyeball, if you can see it close enough. He likes lying up in the Anubias as well. And then I've got a Synodontis lucipinus in this tank that likes hiding in that Anubias. You'd be amazed how many animals can just disappear into that Anubias. You'd think it was too dense and thick to swim into, but even that big Pleco right there, even that fish swims into that Anubias and just disappears. So that's what's going on with those Siamese algae eaters, and then we will have an update briefly on these Siamese algae eaters. I've got the one there. Here's another one coming over to say hello. We've got another one over here. So there should be 4 of them in the tank, and I see 3. There's all 4 of them right there. So they swim around in a little group most of the times. They do sort of go their separate ways, but this tank has so much activity with so many small schooling fish swimming around that they're able to sort of mingle with the crowd and don't have to stay together as a group the whole time. But you can see that one back there. They don't take too much of a break. They don't spend too long in between stopping to eat algae. I mean, they're constantly at it at this age, these really small ones. I mean, you can see them. They just stop constantly looking for more algae. So they do really lose their interest in algae to some degree as they get older. But as we've seen, they still do a fine job at removing algae. And the important thing is the type of algae they remove. You can get any old fish that's going to scrape, a rubber lip, a bristle nose, any kind of fish will scrape all of that stuff clean. You see how nice and clean the woodwork is? That's from the rubber lips in there. That, again, is only possible because those Siamese algae eaters made it possible. They got all of that hair algae out of the way, and then the other fish in this tank were able to do their thing and keep it nice and clean. If you follow along again, you'll know that this tank not long ago was covered in that hair algae. This tank was downright gross. It had so much of that hair algae. It was starting to look like a swamp. And I put these 4 young Siamese algae eaters in it, and literally within days, it was an obviously noticeable difference. And within a week or two, I was just stunned. I mean, I'm just stunned at what this tank looks like after putting those Siamese algae eaters in there. So Siamese algae eaters are not to be confused with Chinese algae eaters, which is this fish. And that has much more of a sucker mouth on it. This is more of the grazing, scraping type fish. This is probably about as big as this one's going to get. Fish are indeterminate growth animals, so they will continue to grow throughout their lives. I have heard they can get up to 11 inches in the wild, but seldom get that big in aquaria. However, these are frequently sold to people, especially beginners, for their 10 or 20 or 30 gallon tank to keep it clean. And they will do that at first, but these fish actually become territorial and aggressive when they get older, and these fish definitely lose their desire for algae and want meaty food. And I had this fish here actually killed a couple of my angelfish by attaching to them and scraping the slime coat off of them, and it wound up doing so much damage that it killed them. So ever since then, I've made sure I keep this tank well fed, and we don't have any problems with that. But there's a big difference between the Chinese algae eater and the Siamese algae eater, and I do not recommend the Chinese algae eater. That is the one you're going to see real commonly at your big chain pet stores. They're sold for $1 or $2. You'll see a golden version. You'll occasionally see albino versions of them, and they're really small and slender, and they look cute and adorable when you put them in your 10-gallon tank, but they grow really fast, and they get really territorial and aggressive and unpleasant, and trust me, you do not want them. There are plenty of other fish out there for small tanks if you need an algae-eating fish. My recommendation, if you've got a small tank and you're looking for an algae-eating fish, I would recommend Otocinclus. They are worth their weight in gold when it comes to eating algae. Otocinclus are just fantastic. This is my spotted tilapia. If you're wondering why we're looking at it, well, just look at it. That's why we're looking at it. It's amazing looking. This is just such a gorgeous fish. I love it. So that's that. I'm off to go kayaking. I just wanted to shoot that update on my Siamese Algae Eaters before I got out of here, because I probably won't be till late when I get home this evening. And I was asked to do that video and said I would. And it's been a couple weeks, so I didn't want to forget too much about that. I've got a list of videos that I know I've promised I'll shoot at some point, and I've yet to get to. But I wanted to knock this one off the list. So there's a look at my Siamese Algae Eaters. Remember, there's a big difference between them and the Chinese Algae Eaters. Definitely stay away from them and stick with these Siamese. You'll be much, much happier. So thanks for watching this one. Make sure you're subscribed. Don't forget, this one here is my 40 breeder. I'll see you real soon in the next one.